I started dating a guy I met on a dating app when I was 22 years old. Hunter was his name. We went on around 4 dates in just over a month. Initially, everything appeared to be fine. Our first coffee date lasted less than an hour. It was more of a screening procedure to ensure he appeared normal. We had cocktails at a local tavern on our second date. We both had a good time and felt buzzed. It was after supper on our third date that I began to have doubts. Consider whether I truly connected with his personality or whether I thought he was a little strange. The date came to a conclusion with a kiss. The one and only time we ever shared a kiss. I so convinced myself that everything was fine since I let him to kiss me. We didn't go on our fourth and last date until a few weeks later. We went out to drinks once more, but this time, I approached it with less enthusiasm and focused more on the small details in his actions that I noticed were a little strange. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly what I mean, but several of his behaviors just seemed antisocial and a little unsettling. He began drinking excessively on this date as well, and he became overly affectionate while trying to kiss several times at the bar. I don't like PDA, especially when I'm at a bar with people sitting next to me. I graciously declined his advances, and after a few minutes, I said I was exhausted, strongly suggesting that we should go. After requesting and paying the check, we gathered our coats and departed. He abruptly stopped me as we were making our way to our cars and asked if we could go home together. I lied when I said, "Not tonight. I'm tired, and I have work tomorrow." Amazingly, he persisted in trying, promising to drive me to work tomorrow and other things. I thought it was strange whether or not he was intoxicated. Additionally, I didn't like him driving home after drinking. At that moment, I decided I would never see him again. Just because I had a few drinks in my system, I went to my car in the lot across the street and began driving slowly home. Even though I wasn't intoxicated, I was quite cautious. Perhaps because I was so aware of my surroundings and scanning the area for police, I noticed that the same automobile was still behind me after making at least 3 bends. At one stoplight, I noticed it resembled Hunter's vehicle. I texted him, "Are you keeping up with me?" He replied to the SMS somewhat fast, stating, "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home okay." When I called him, he didn't answer. This was really strange and unsettling. I texted him to stop following me, and I'm all right. He paused briefly in the middle of the road, so I assumed he read my text, and he then drove away from me. He didn't respond to my text till I was in bed at home. "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight," he said. "I apologize for getting so wasted. Perhaps we should do something a little more subdued the next time, like having supper at my house or whatever." I didn't respond. The following morning, he inquired, "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I still chose to hold off on responding for a little while. Not even 2 hours have passed when he writes me a query. So, before things got worse, I made the decision to respond. I said, "Hey, I had a terrific time learning about you, but it seems to me that our personalities don't mesh well. I hope you realize that I too truly simply want to concentrate on me at the moment." This is when the angry texts began to appear, the worst of which is that I don't comprehend. You made me go on 4 dates just to tell me that? Then, how about you reimburse me for half of what I purchased for you? There were several more irate texts that included. I won't list them because they contain personal information, but they were sufficient to cause me to block him. I had assumed that this would be the last time, but I soon began to receive calls without caller ID, continuously. I didn't pay attention to any of them until he finally stopped, seemingly understanding the message. The following: one day, while my parents weren't home, I came home from work to discover a note and a bunch of flowers on the stoop. Hunter apologized on the card and asked for another opportunity. Somehow, he knew where I survived. I was concerned by that. He must have believed that this would come off as nice or sweet in his thoughts, while in fact it was quite concerning. I sent him a lengthy and final text message asking him to stop contacting me and to never return to my house again, failing which I will request a restraining order. In order to prevent seeing his response, I kept his number blocked. I was completely mistaken to believe that everything would be over now. Shortly after this, I spent the night at home by myself. Since I had a loft bedroom and my parents' house is large, my bedroom was the highest point in the house. Something awakened me up in the middle of the night. At first, I wasn't sure what it was. but I thought I could hear sounds coming from downstairs. After doing my best to listen intently, I heard what was clearly a door opening outside my bedroom, one of the doors upstairs. That night, nobody was supposed to be home. Even in my daze from just waking up, I thought of the invader right away. I slithered from my bed onto the floor and shivered beneath it. Before dialing 911, I texted my entire family to find out who was home. I could hear faint sounds coming from one of the other bedrooms in the house. Then footsteps came up the carpeted stairs and my bedroom door opened. There was silence once they got to the top step. Since the entire space was carpeted, I was unable to hear any possible footfall. I then heard the drawers next to my bed start to open. I covered my mouth with my hands to keep from inhaling. I could sense my heart pounding. Under his breath, I heard a man's voice exclaim, "God fucking damn it." That might have sounded like Hunter's voice, I thought at the time. I still remained still, and I wished that my phone would stop receiving alerts. There were additional sounds of rummaging. He was looking through my entire wardrobe. Then, when he sat down, I felt and heard the bed shift. I was looking through the bed skirt at the shape of two shoes. In the dark, it was still discernible. I'm not sure what he was doing on the bed, but he sat there for more than 2 or 3 minutes before getting up, and I overheard him say, "Fucking bitch," under his breath. I heard every drawer close, followed by footsteps returning down the stairs and through the door. Closing, followed by footsteps coming down the stairs to the living room. Just to be safe, I mumbled into the phone as I called 911. For 10 to 15 minutes, I remained on the line and behind the bed until a police officer arrived, at which point I went downstairs to meet. Even meeting them at the front door was awkward. I told him everything he didn't already know from the phone call he answered after I let him in. As a result, he cleaned the house, and another officer showed up during that time. This woman, who helped with the search as well. It turned out that all of the windows were unlocked, and the dining room window is large enough for someone to crawl through, though I doubt anyone ever imagined someone squeezing through the bush in front of the window and then crawling through it. I made a verbal declaration about everything. After giving me a report number, they departed. My folks knew everything from my phone calls and texts with them by the time they got home the following day. With my report number in hand, we proceeded to the police station and provided as much information as we could, including text screen grabs and his admission that he was following me home. They promised to look into it, but it was difficult without concrete evidence. I believe the case stalled when I didn't actually have any supporting evidence. I was told not to accuse him of breaking in or get in touch with him ever again, but I was able to obtain a restraining order against him. Fortunately, he didn't, but I was constantly worried that he would be skulking around outside my parents' house until I moved out. Even now, I occasionally worry that he might discover where I am. Live. This incident occurred when I was in the 6th grade. All of this began during the week of Halloween, when I would stay after school to assist with decorating a haunted house for the Halloween carnival at my school. I frequently had the opportunity to hang out and joke about with some of my pals while receiving pizza for, assisting with the decor, in addition to my companions. There was another child, I'll name him Chris, who would remain late. During the whole time we would hang out after school, we got along well, and he never once made me feel uncomfortable. He was a really cool and entertaining kid. Anyway, let's fast forward 2 weeks. A group of girls from my school surprised me by coming up to me. They were all quite happy and smiling broadly. I inquired as to what was happening, only to have them inform me that I had a secret admirer who would text me tonight. If I told you that I wasn't thrilled, or at the very least intrigued, about this, I would be lying to you. I was curious as to who. I was about to turn in for the night when I received a notification from Messenger. I often used it to talk to my parents while I was at home by myself, because it was the only app one had at the time. The communication came from Chris. I had entirely forgotten that I added him on Halloween on Facebook. When I opened the message, it said, "Maya, I need to talk to you." I immediately responded, "Yeah, what's going on?" Out of concern, "Is everything all right?" I still wish I hadn't responded. He was still typing because the typing bubbles showed up and remained there for at least 2 minutes. It seemed like an eternity before his message arrived. I had no idea what would happen next. He revealed his love for me and how I've been making him crazy since Halloween in a lengthy paragraph. He also went on to say that I never seemed to notice him when he tried to impress me with his soccer talents during physical education and recess. I want you to notice me, he said, adding, I guess what I'm trying to say is, will you be my girlfriend? He was weary of being ignored. Every word made me cringe. I looked at the message for a while. I barely know this kid, and I drifted away from him a long time ago. What the hell? I was attempting to think of a simple way to disappoint him because I didn't want to offend him. I told him that I only wanted to be friends with him and that I didn't like him like that. I could tell immediately that this response didn't sit well with him. He continued asking me why, and I had to explain myself each time until he finally stopped responding. For me, the following morning was a nightmare. Throughout the entire grade, Chris told me that he wanted to kiss me and that he would do it even if it meant cornering me. But several of his pals kept approaching me and telling me this. Considering this a threat, I made the decision to inform my teacher. She instructed me to remain inside at lunch and recess and to immediately return to the classroom if he ever approached me. For me, this wasn't sufficient. I informed the principal about him, and I felt some relief when he promised to take immediate action. I should point out that everyone, including Chris, knew that I lived directly across the street from my school, which brings me to the following point. Later that week, I was making my way home from school on foot. It had been over 2 minutes after I entered my home when I heard a knock on the front door. I caught a glimpse of someone snooping behind a parked car across the street as I peered out the window. Chris had to be the one. He must have been keeping tabs on me. When my mother answered the door, she saw a piece of paper on the ground that was obviously addressed to me. I read the note aloud, and it stated that my brother's car, which was then in my driveway, had a surprise waiting for me underneath it. My brother's Cadillac stopped running after this day, but my mother went to check and found nothing. My brother felt compelled to sell the car, but I'm still not sure what Chris did to it. Regretfully, my nightmare doesn't stop there. Chris's pals pressure me all the time, asking me to give him a chance and that he would treat me well. Chris even took a picture of me coming home at one point, and the only reason I noticed him was because the sound of an iPhone camera behind me was barely audible. How many pictures of me did he have on his phone? And he would send me a message every morning that said something like, I can't wait to see you at school, or I bet you'll look beautiful today. I was starting to worry about my safety because the harassment and stalking were only getting worse, especially now that he knew where I lived. I was relieved when I finally received a call to the counselor's office, anticipating that she would inform me that Chris would be arriving. Issue, or that the police would become involved. Anything. What I heard was worse instead. The counselor went on to tell me that I shouldn't be upset about this because boys will be boys and they will do crazy things when they're in love. She told me that I should be flattered since this kind of thing was inevitable and that all I could do was accept it and grow from it. I honestly believed her at the time, so I didn't see the issue with what she said, but now that I think about it, this was a crazy and saying anything upsetting to a 6th grader who was experiencing sexual harassment and was worried about her safety nearly every day. I told my mother everything the counselor had told me when I got home from school that afternoon, and she was understandably incensed. That same week, I was summoned to the principal's office once more, this time with my mother in attendance. I vividly recall my mother asking the principal and counselor, "What are you waiting for? For anything negative to happen to her before you take action?" She persisted in asking why nothing was getting done so quickly. Both of them remained mute. In order to end it, my mother threatened the counselor and instructed her to never speak to me again unless she was there. Unfortunately, though, I don't believe the school ever disciplined Chris, which still infuriates me. He essentially got away with it all, and it doesn't stop there. I was preparing to turn in for the night after watching a YouTube video on my iPad one weekend after my parents had gone shopping when I heard something outside my window. Now that I'm on the 2nd story, this was really odd. Birds inadvertently flying into my window is the only thing that strikes it. I listened while sitting up. Then it happened once more. It sounded as though something had been thrown at the glass. After that, it continued to happen. They kept thudding, and I was beginning to get freaked out. At last, I had the fortitude to get out of bed and investigate. When I raised the curtain and glanced down to see Chris peering up at my window while holding a handful of rocks, my heart fell to my stomach. He had figured out which window belonged to me somehow. He saw me just as he was ready to toss another. He seemed to be saying something, but I didn't pause to find out what it was. I recall checking to make sure all the doors and windows were locked, and happily they were. Upon my return to my room, Chris had left me 4 messages. "You left, but why? All I want to do is talk. I apologize. I just wanted to be kissed. Please pardon me. You are not who I believed you to be. Goodbye." Then I blocked him. Fortunately, I never experienced another incident, despite having to see him from 6th grade to senior year of school. When I last heard from him, he had been taken into custody. God alone is aware of the purpose. The saddest and scariest aspect of my tale, however, is that a counselor felt at ease informing me that this type of behavior was a compliment and a teaching moment for me as a girl. All I can hope for is that I never have to see Chris again and that the woman no longer works with kids. I would prefer to remain as anonymous as possible. My PTSD is related to this really traumatic incident, which regrettably left me scarred. I'm altering all of the towns and names in this story so that I can't be held accountable. I've spent the majority of my life as a fairly secluded person. It began when I was quite young. My teachers would warn my parents that I had antisocial behavior as early as my early school years. Issues. I suppose you would even include me in some of the special 20-minute speech and conduct classes that are offered in primary schools. I didn't understand at the time why I was being taken there while the other students in my class weren't. When the social pressures of school truly began to set in, middle school was the time. Children began to create friendship groups, which only grew worse as they progressed through high school. I never had any kind of learning disability. Even if my social problems have improved as I've aged, I still consider myself to be an awkward, introverted person. But I'm thankful for the close friends I have formed. For that, let's talk about girls now, though. Of course, having issues with the ladies is a part of being a social hermit. To be honest, I don't want to get too graphic, but it has some significance for my story. At age 21, I lost my virginity. I'd say that's a little late. This occurred at the age of 23. I've already left my folks' house. I had been working for a townhouse in my hometown in a well-paying position in my field. It was quite reasonably priced, yet a lovely, spacious townhouse. It had 2 levels, but I no longer reside there. If you had a location like that, girls at 23 would be impressed. Thus, one day, swiping on, I found a very decent-looking female on Tinder. I'm gonna call her Emily. We had dinner together at a local restaurant. I had a small mental image that she was evaluating me or thinking I was being awkward, and at the end of it, I had the impression that she would never want to see me again. But once I got home and was in bed, she told me she had a great time and truly liked me. And to be honest, I was overjoyed. We went on a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th date, and to be honest, after I cleared my mind, everything felt fantastic. Our relationship ended soon, but the honeymoon period wasn't long-lasting. Forever. When you initially start dating someone, you get thrilled whenever they call or text you. Since attention should ideally be reciprocated, you want for it. However, gradually, I began to feel even though she might have been messaging me too much. Throughout the day, she would inquire about my whereabouts. She would contact me or to give me follow-up question marks if I was working on anything or maybe waited too long to react. We were sitting on the couch one day. She insisted that we share our places with one another. This didn't excite me, despite the fact that I had nothing to conceal. In any case, I did it. After a few months of dating, we have shared locations, and this is where a lot of bad things happened. She would begin questioning me about why I was at Phil's place and not responding to her texts. It grew so bad that one Friday night, while I was in Phil's basement with my friend Mark, she actually showed up at his house, and Phil's mother walked Emily downstairs. She didn't even disguise the fact that she was furious with me. She scolded me for playing about at Phil's place rather than responding to her text about going to a winery the next day in a loud, nearly yelling manner. When I asked if we could talk about this later, she demanded that I go with her. After I apologized to my companions, I accompanied her outdoors. We got into a fight in the street. She asked to accompany me home, but I told her no. Naturally, We drove separately, so I instructed her not to follow me as I went home. I texted her for a long time when I came home to let her know that I needed space and that we needed a break. Had I had to do this face-to-face? Yes, most likely. Although text message breakups are usually unfair, to be honest at the time, I was afraid of her in-person reaction. Naturally, she began phoning me non-stop and bombarding my phone with texts. When I finally stopped replying, my townhouse's front door began to pound violently, and the doorbell continued to ring. My neighbor actually came out and asked her what she was doing since it had become so terrible. When I heard Emily yelling at him, "I'm a piece of shit," my neighbor calmly ordered her to go home. I practically listened to everything up until the door. She did go, and to be honest, I was a little upset. I'm not claiming that the insane appeared out of thin air. There were undoubtedly warning indications, but the honeymoon effects made me blind to some of them. The following day, I remembered to cease telling her where I was, and she instantly blasted me for it, acting as though she were compulsively reading our texts. With each text she sent, my resolve to break up contact with her became more and more certain. "I am sorry, Emily. I have to block you for a while. You're scaring me," was my last text to her. Surprisingly, she didn't knock or do anything. But I also saw that she immediately ceased sharing her location. It was precisely a week later. I visited Phil's residence once again and spent time with the guys. I departed at approximately 11 p.m. and arrived home shortly after. I put some food in the microwave because I was hungry and not tired, and then I settled down to watch a movie on the couch. I wanted a scary movie, so I started looking through all the streaming applications for something good. After the microwave stopped beeping and was quiet, I heard a thump or click coming from the dining room. Thus, the arrangement of the townhouses downstairs. It went around in a circle. It extended from the kitchen to the living room, dining room, den, and dining room, with a wall separating each. But rather than having an aperture, the den that led to the dining room had a door. I've included this image to provide a better concept. I reached for the TV remote and silenced the TV to ensure total quiet. I must have heard the door between the dining room and the den click open at that point. I looked into the eating area. Naturally, there was no response when I blurted out who was present. My blood was freezing when I walked into the dining room and noticed that the door had been opened. I have a habit of keeping doors closed in my house, and this door was no different. I walked to the kitchen and took the largest knife out of the block. I immediately dialed 911 as well. I had never in my life phoned 911. It was the first time. I spoke loudly on the phone so that anyone in the room could hear that I was speaking with the cops. Whether this was a smart idea or not is probably up for debate. I said, "Please send someone. I think my crazy ex-girlfriend broke in my house." For the remainder of the call, she explained the situation, gave me the reason I believed it to be my ex, and told me to wait outside if at all possible. I decided to go outdoors and wait close to the front entrance. Unexpectedly fast, a police cruiser pulled up. I gave the police a quick explanation of what I believed was happening and escorted him inside my house. Together, we conducted the most exhaustive search of the area, and I can assure you that nobody was inside. We looked in every closet, even the tiny crawl hole that was concealed inside, as well as behind the mattresses, couches, and even the tiny attic. He told me to call again if I heard anything when everything was literally clear, which gave me the impression that he trusted me and understood I wasn't lying or going insane. After that, my night was certainly interrupted, and I was never going to be able to sit in the living room and watch a movie again. After eating the food that had been in the microwave, I went to my room and shut the door. Naturally, I emailed all of my friends and family to let them know how terrified I was, but because no one was home, I had to write it off as one of those unsettling moments when something in the house moves on its own. I considered texting Emily, but decided against it. I took a melatonin, and based on my memory, I unexpectedly fell asleep really rapidly. I'm a light sleeper, though, and something woke me up. I couldn't identify it, but there seemed to be something strange about the place. I must have been awakened by the numerous texts I received from a random number when I checked my phone. I knew right away that it was Emily. Without actually reading the message, she emailed me. She was essentially saying that she wanted to talk and that she was sorry. In the remaining texts, she repeatedly asked if I was awake and urged me to meet up with her so we could speak in person tomorrow. She used SMS to say wake up 8 times in all. She hadn't tried calling me, which surprised me. I said, "Why are you awake at this hour? It's crazy that you're blowing me up like this." To be honest, if I wasn't certain earlier, your behavior in the last few days alone has verified that I no longer wish to interact with you. Just leave me alone, please. A few seconds after I hit send, I heard someone screaming from the closet next to my bed. It was Emily's voice screamed, "No," as the closet door suddenly flew open. I had no time to consider anything other than getting out of bed, opening the bedroom door, and getting out of there, leaving the room. Don't worry, it wasn't locked anymore. I pushed the door shut after leaving the room and held it closed while she attempted to open it. But instead of just trying to open it, she began stabbing the door, and I noticed the knife she was brandishing stabbing my side. Instead of saying "you're sick," I chose to yell, "Baby, I love you, stop. When you require assistance." She paused and calmed down when I told her I loved her, so I took this as take a moment to secretly call 911 once more while keeping the door closed. We conversed through the door at this point, and I had 9111 on the line when I said some nonsense on the fact that, although I was going through a difficult moment at the moment, I loved her and intended to reunite with her. "That's all I wanted to hear," she replied in a panicked tone. "Why couldn't you just be honest with me?" I was requested to open the door by her, but I had to wait. I told her that I wanted her to put down the knife because I was afraid. She eventually consented, and I informed her to hurl it across the room and listen for its landing. Yes, she did. I heard the knife clang as it bounced off the wall and onto the ground. Thus, what I did next was pulled the door open and threw Emily to the ground. She struggled, shouted, and lost her mind. I was unconcerned. I restrained her while shouting my address and all of my information into the phone, which was still in contact with 911. I kept her restrained until the police showed up. I was shocked to learn that the police actually kicked down the front door, and it was so loud it could be heard all the way upstairs as Emily struggled. Police hurried inside the room. Actually, quite a bit of police. Emily sobbed loudly as she was swiftly placed in handcuffs. I believe that the one reason I wasn't. I started crying because I was so shocked. The hardest and most painful night of my life was this one. However, the nightmare didn't stop there. A protracted and grave legal procedure ensued, culminating in Emily's conviction. I've been cautious since I never wanted my identity or any information to appear on one of those illegal YouTube channels, revealing too much information that might be used against me. Emily is incarcerated on some quite serious accusations. I'm not happy about any of that. This was someone I spent a significant portion of my life with almost every day. Someone I believed to be my love. Someone who attempted my murder. She wasn't right in the head, and I still regret how uninformed I was. Not only was I first so enamored of her, but I also lacked confidence to the point where I was so preoccupied with pleasing her that I neglected to pay for it. Early on to pay notice to any concerning behaviors on her part. This will always be a part of me, and to be honest, it would feel nice to finally share this experience, even if it were anonymous. If it is selected for reading,